If you like this episode, please subscribe, share with others, rate and review so we can continue to bring you great programming.
This is The Thing About Cars, a podcast for car enthusiasts and the people who love them.
Hello, this is Mickey Desai. Actually, I should probably start that a little differently. Let's just take two. Hello, this is The Thing About Cars, and I am Mickey Desai. Around the table, we've got our good buddy Ben.
Hey.
That's Ben, and we have Trivia Czar Tim.
Hi there.
Tim's there, and our special guest for the day is Sam Fiorani. Fiorani, thank you for not laughing at me. But Sam, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Yes, I can't wait to learn more about you and your history in the automotive sector. But first, we're going to ask our trivia question, our grand trivia auto question of the day, which we will answer at the end of the episode. And the question is simply, what was the last car offered with hidden or flip-up headlights? And was it, our choices are, was it a Chevrolet Corvette? Was it a Lotus Esprit? Was it a Mazda MX-5/Miata? Was it both the Corvette and the Esprit, or was it both the Esprit and the Miata? So those are our five choices. Do I need to read any of that again?
Nope.
Ben's got it. Okay, cool. So Sam, how are you?
Doing very well. How are you doing?
I'm good. How did we meet?
I believe we met through LinkedIn.
I think it was just strictly LinkedIn, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And did you find me or did I find you? I'm having trouble remembering that.
I don't recall, but it would probably me finding you because I'm very active on LinkedIn.
Yeah, same. Actually, I post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn and we meet a lot of cool folks there. What is your history in the automotive sector?
Well, my love of cars has gone back to when I was a kid. At 2 or 3, my folks would say that I could name cars from their headlights or taillights.
Yeah.
So
I was like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of us were, and it blossomed into an affliction. And my dad would tell me that you got to find other interests. Cars are not it. I would start a conversation with a perfect stranger, and 5 minutes later we'd be talking about cars.
It happened
all the time. So I met a lot of people growing up, and one of them happened to be a gentleman named Stan Stevenson. And after I graduated college and sold cars poorly for a few months, Stan wrangled a job interview at Chilton.
Oh.
And so I started writing Chilton repair manuals.
No way. That's pretty cool.
Yes. It was a great office. The guys were former guys. There were 2 women who wrote editorial with me at the time, but the group of us were a lot of former mechanics. I was not one of them. I briefly worked in a shop where we repaired British cars, but I was the greeter. I was the handyman. I did whatever we could. I did not work on cars unless there was something that they couldn't reach.
Right.
Like checking the brake fluid on an MGTD or something. But I started working for Chilton in 92 and worked for one of their magazines briefly before moving over to Standard & Poor's DRI in 97. And I've been an analyst for the industry ever since.
Wow, cool. I've got some questions for you, but I know Ben and Tim may want to jump in. Ben has an affinity for British cars in particular, I believe. Isn't that right, Ben?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. No.
You may want to expound on that a little bit.
Oh, well, I'm a serial Lotus owner. I'm on my second one right now.
Very nice.
First one was an 86 that I got in 2010, and I currently have a 1970 that I've had for about 6 years now. The 86 didn't need that much. It just had a little neglect from the previous owner, but this 1970 model needed everything.
He's been busy doing that. The only thing he hasn't done is taking it off the frame, although I could be wrong about that by now.
Not yet, but it's possibly in the future.
Right.
We have a 72 MG midget that we've been working on for the last 35 years. And
that's how it goes.
Nice.
But I have a love for Lotus and have since I was a kid. But the closest I got to owning a Lotus was the week I owned a Jensen Healey.
Oh, nice.
Just a week? 1 week? What happened?
Well, it was a great story because I lived in one of the outer parts of Philadelphia, and my buddy and I we had just moved in recently, and my buddy and I were driving along, and he goes, just down the street, there's a used car lot and they have a TVR. I'm like, TVR in Philadelphia just seems weird. So we drove down by there and they're sitting a Jensen Healey, and it has written on it's just sitting on the lot, and it's a brand new lot. It literally popped up that week. And so there's this 20-year-old Jensen Healey sitting there, and we were going somewhere. And I taught my buddy, who looks like your all-American boy, blonde hair, tall, looks kind of like a surfer. I give him all the details, everything I know about Jensen. I train him everything in the next hour. So on the way back home, we stop in there, and now they have written across the windshield $4,500. I said, oh, we're going to go talk to this guy. So this was 92. So we go talk to the guy, and he shows us around, and the whole time he tells us he has no idea what this car is. He's selling it for a friend, and we're like, well, if you get $4,500, take that check and run to the bank. And so my buddy is schmoozing him while I'm digging out underneath the car, looking the car over, and the guy is talking to me while my buddy is talking to him. And we're like, oh no, $4,500. If you get $4,500, run. And so as we're talking, he starts negotiating himself down. And before we left there, he goes, if you take it off my hands, I'll give it to you for $1,500 today.
Oh man.
You know, and I had no money, and I'm like, I'm going to go call my old boss and see if he wants it. So I call him. I got this car, this Jensen Healey, it's almost complete, $1,500. He said, try and talk him down to 12, but I'll take it. I'm like, I just talked him for 4,500 to 15. So we went back and we bought the car, and it needed a water pump. So we eased its way over to a house and parked it there. And he came and picked it up and took it home. But I had it in my possession for a week.
Nice.
Man.
Tell you what, though, that's the 900 series engine, and it's a lot easier to do the water pump on that engine in a Jensen Healey than it is in an Esprit.
Absolutely.
I've done it on the Esprit, and I don't ever want to do that again.
Yeah, the Jensen Healey was just cobbled together from parts, and you could tell.
Right. Sam, you mentioned Stan Stevenson. Is that a name that I should know?
Stan Stevenson was the editor of Motor Age magazine for a long time, and so the people definitely within Chilton, but people within the automotive industry, the journalism industry, from probably the mid to early 70s into the late 80s would know him. He was an icon, and he taught me about what to do in the industry and taught me his automotive history. He was a great mentor of mine. We lost him about 15 years ago.
Oh goodness. Okay. That's cool. You mentioned that you've become something of an analyst now. What does that mean? What are you analyzing?
My job since 97 has been to analyze the automotive industry and do sales and production forecasting. Oh, so when I was with DRI, it was North American focused, and I did a monthly forecast on North American sales and production. And since 2014, I've been with Auto Forecast Solutions. And we do a global forecast. We do global production forecast covering, I lost count, but it's around 60 countries. And every car from beginning to end, running through, right now we're doing a forecast through 2034.
My goodness. So when's the right time for me to buy a car?
The right time to buy a car is not now.
Right.
Because it's a seller's market at the moment. So we're just waiting for some vehicles to show up so that we can actually sell them and give the power back to the buyers, which we've had for years, but haven't had in the last two.
Yeah. So who uses these reports that you generate?
We sell to the industry. We sell to vehicle manufacturers, suppliers, financial houses, anyone who's looking for deep knowledge of the industry itself, where we do production level forecasting by nameplate, by plant. So if you supply parts, you want to know, my story is always, General Motors says we're going to build 100,000 of these vehicles, and they come to me and go, no, really, how many are they going to set? How many are they going to build?
Right.
And we go, no, they're going to build 75,000 of those, not 100,000. So that's my job.
Right.
Okay.
No, that's cool. That's good intel to have.
Yeah. No, it's as a automotive addict, this has been a great job, because when I was a kid, getting a magazine, so I was like 3 months behind the news, because by the time it got published and everything, that was like a drug to me. I needed it faster. And so when I worked for Chilton, we were getting the press releases, we were getting the knowledge from the companies. So I was down to when the magazines knew it. And now I'm ahead of the curve, and I'm the source for the magazines now.
That's just amazing.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's too cool. Have you discovered anything surprising during your time as an analyst?
I've been surprised that the industry doesn't know enough about the industry. Vehicle manufacturers are pretty knowledgeable, but they still make these dumb mistakes in developing where they're going to build vehicles, platforms. There are too many platforms, too many programs, too much investment in stuff that they don't need. And if they would consolidate further, the coming electric movement is consolidating a lot of stuff. So you're gonna see a lot of money savings by developing a line of electric motors as opposed to a line of 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 cylinder engines, and multi-speed transmissions and everything. It'll be much more simple coming forward. But we're always surprised that the suppliers don't know as much as we think they should know. When they ask us questions, we're like, why are you asking that? That's knowledge you should know. And,
Right.
And we're more than happy to help them along. But we're just always surprised that they don't know as much about this business.
It always surprises me that even the big boys who have all the money in the world to do all the research in the world, they just don't do it.
Yeah. We always say that our biggest competition is the internet. So our a lot of clients come to us and like, oh, well, we do all our research on the internet. You didn't realize how far behind the curve you are just by doing that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's
So
crazy.
Sam, in the position that you're in, and since I'm behind the curve on electric vehicles, in the history of internal combustion motors, we knew that the Ford Motor Corporation made all their own motors, General Motors the same, Chrysler the same. In electric vehicles, are we seeing the electric motors being made by the individual corporations, or are they being outsourced from
Well, like the early days of the automotive industry, the companies did not make their own engine. So at this point, a lot of the motors are being outsourced simply because the volume's not there yet. And so if you're building 1 million of a particular V8, you can make the money on that. But if you're building 50,000 of a particular electric motor, you're not necessarily going to make money on that. So it makes much more sense to outsource who supplies the motor to you at this point. Once you're building, Toyota building 10 million electric vehicles, which will be sometime like 2050 or so, it would make more sense for them to build their own motors and develop their own character with those motors.
Yeah. So how many major players are there in the electric motor production world right now?
Off the top of my head, I don't have it, but there are at least a dozen that I can name that would be building motors. And the technology is developing fast, where they put an electric motor on a hybrid vehicle. So you'll see the Toyotas with a gas engine and a transmission up front, but an electric motor out back, and hybridizing the all-wheel drive system. This is one step on the way to fully electric vehicles that manufacturers are exploring.
Sure.
That's it.
Cool.
I mean, yeah, you're giving me notes here. Ben, you got any questions?
Not yet. You guys think faster than I do.
Sorry, taking notes. We're going to have to do some minor surgery to this episode.
Sure.
But I have a question related to the whole EV transition. I'm a lover of internal combustion engines. I'm not a hater of electric vehicles yet, but there's a part of me that just hasn't achieved my lifelong dream of owning a big screaming engine inside of a car where you can drive it and it makes so much noise and goes so fast that it scares small children and nuns. So is it past time for me to indulge myself in that fantasy? Is there going to be a time when it's simply too late or not wise to own an internal combustion engine like that?
Internal combustion engines will be around for decades to come. They're not going away anytime soon, simply because the infrastructure has to be built up to charge the electric vehicles. The infrastructure has to be built there to build batteries, to build motors, all the different, and then the repair industry of fixing these things. All these things have to develop a long time. So it's going to be progressive. It's not going to be as quick as if you consider from, let's say, 1900, when the Oldsmobile curved dash came out, the first affordable car, to the Model T, and 10 years later. I don't think the switch is going to be that dramatic that quickly, but it will take time over the next 20 years or more that we'll see that switch. So internal combustion engines will still be around in certain parts for 20, 30, 40 years to come.
Interesting.
But there's always going to be the aftermarket, because cars came along, they didn't give up riding horses. So they're
Right.
still the fans of riding horses.
That's true. I just don't want to have to spend money on a expensive stable for a gas guzzler if EVs are all around. That's the thing though, because we're seeing legislation change the market a little bit in terms of I think it was California leading the way with no more. What did they say? Do you guys remember, Ben?
They're not
I
going to
wanna-
allow sales of internal combustion engines after. Well, I think it is actually fully internal combustion engines. I think hybrids are allowed, and after 35. But you'll still be able to buy them. You'll still be able to buy a vehicle used, and I think it gives room for you to buy them out of state as long as they meet California emissions. And emissions are the reason why the switch is being hastened, because 15% of all emissions in the world are transportation.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
in order to lower that, we're going to have to tighten it up. And that 15% is an amazing number to me, because a car today puts out 1% of the emissions that a car did in 1970.
Yes.
So in 50 years, we've gone from 100% to 1% of the emissions, and we're still 15% of all emissions as being transportation related.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. And on the other side of that, a friend of mine who's a mechanical engineer quoted a statistic to me. He says that even current electric vehicles still put out as much particulate matter as a gas burner in terms of the weight of the car, the amount of tire that they go through, because they tend to be heavier and stuff like that. But anyway, you were about to say.
Tire development is progressing. There are tires that are developed for EVs now. The emissions from electric generation now is constantly getting cleaner, and people will make the argument that, oh, what if your local is coal burning? Well, it's a grid. The electric grid covers the 47 of the continental 48 states, and so you're mixing in coal burning with nuclear, with wind, with solar, with everything else, and so in the mix, it is actually a cleaner mix when all is said and done.
And to dovetail on that, I think it's worth noting that there will always be more options for generating electricity than there will be for making combustion fuel.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I sit on the board of a car museum, and one of the members of the museum sent out an email recently that said that in 1900, I think it was, that a third of the vehicles sold were internal combustion. Well, 2/3 of the vehicles were either steam or electric, and we're slowly turning that back. And we've had a century of development of ICEs and only about 20 years of EVs, that serious development. So we're right at the beginning of this curve.
It sounds like you're a major proponent of EVs.
I like EVs.
Mm-hmm.
I like cars more. So I've driven a number of EVs, and they are fantastic vehicles. My biggest problem with EVs is not the emissions from the electricity generation or any of that stuff. My biggest problem is character. A lot of the cars lack character. And when you, like you said, the sound of a V8 engine, the rumble, the visceral feel of the car, that is part of the ownership of an ICE. And the people who drive the muscle cars of the 60s, the people who buy Hemi V8s today, they love that sound. And you can tell when a Ram truck drives by and you hear that truck coming down, that guy and usually it is a guy driving that truck, wants to hear that noise of that engine.
Sure.
And when you drive by in your Model 3 and it makes no sound except for the roll of the tires, there's a big difference there. And it'll take a little while before the character of the power generation, the actual rollout of the power, where it's just in 3 seconds, 0 to 60, you can't really build character into it. It's just the thrust of the car.
Right.
But there's going to be something that you can develop that says our power generation between 40 and 60 is different than yours. So it actually has some character.
Oh, yeah.
So who is actually making the engines?
The motors?
Yeah, the motors.
Among the supply, General Electric started making electric motors for electric vehicles at least back in the 70s. Our museum has a car that was built with the government, with Chrysler and General Electric, and it has a General Electric DC motor in it. General Motors had joint ventures in the 90s to develop EVs, and so they were developing their own AC motors back then. these motors are progressing, and now there's suppliers like Magna who supplies front and rear motors to a lot of different manufacturers. It's a field unto itself, and it's very much like engine manufacturing was 100 years ago, where we would have the Continentals and the Lycomings and everybody producing an engine, and then you would buy the engine and put it in your carriage and drive it off.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. No, I didn't know that. I mean, I didn't know that individual car makers were not making their own motors.
Some do, but if you're starting production, it's much easier to find a supplier to provide you a motor.
Sure.
Right.
That's cool. You mentioned you were on the board of a car museum. Which museum?
It's the Boyertown Museum of Historic Vehicles in Boyertown, Pennsylvania.
Oh.
The museum specializes in Pennsylvania-built vehicles and electric vehicles, of all things. And the museum itself is in the building that used to supply carriages in the 1800s and truck bodies through the 1980s.
Oh, wow.
That's
and
pretty cool.
They built a few series of electric vehicles from the 60s into the 80s.
Right. The Boyertown Garage and Museum. Is that the place?
No, Boyertown Museum of Historic Vehicle.
Oh, yeah. And this one's not you. This one's in the Yukon.
Oh, yeah. No, that's not us.
Just a little bit down the road.
Right.
Yes.
No, Ben, have you been to this museum?
I have not. I've never even heard of it.
Oh, if you're in the area, please come up and I'll give you a tour.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to. What part of Pennsylvania is that in?
It's about an hour northwest of Philadelphia.
Okay. I've got a trip coming up that I don't think it'll quite fit into, but I wish it would.
Yeah, no, it's a great museum because we have stuff going back from carriages in the 1800s up through electric vehicles. Of the last vehicle one of the last vehicles that was built in the building that the museum holds, it was they converted Volkswagen Rabbits. They bought Rabbits from Westmoreland County, shipped them to Boyertown, took the engines out of them and converted them to electricity. So they built 300 electric Rabbits. We have
I remember hearing a little bit about that a long time ago. Yeah.
That's when the Rabbits those were built in West Virginia?
No, Pennsylvania.
That was okay. All right.
Yeah.
Boyertown. I'm trying to get my grip on geography there. I was born in Eastern Pennsylvania many hundreds of years ago. And I have I have in-laws actually that live in Wilkes-Barre.
Okay. That's a little further north, but not too far away.
In Moscow, but I was born in Reading.
Oh, okay. That Reading is real close.
Real close. Look, now that I'm looking at the map, that's very close. So I will definitely have to make a detour next time I'm traveling through that area.
Give me a call. I'll give you a tour.
I will look forward to that. Maybe we should just, Ben, next time you have a work in the area, maybe I should just play hooky and meet you up there.
That would be fun. I know I've got to see a customer in Wilmington in 2 weeks, flying through Philly, but I don't have quite enough time to make the detour.
Make the time. Come on.
Well, if it's a repair job I'm going to be doing, so if it goes quickly and smoothly, then I might be able to abscond for the rest of the day.
Oh, excuses.
Tim,
I hear you.
Tim, can you get away? Can we do a little, three amigos thing?
I'd have to schedule a vacation for that.
Well,
what fun we would have.
Not show up for work one day.
Right. Well, whenever it happens, I'll be looking forward to that trip, and we'll definitely take you up on a tour for sure.
Absolutely. No, I'm there to take you.
Yeah. What is your favorite thing to drive?
I like a stick shift.
Mm.
If it has a stick shift in it, I will find a way to entertain myself with it. I'm coming to the end of production stick shifts in reasonably priced cars, and I've already decided that my next car is probably going to be a resto mod. So I'm just going to need to find a good chassis and a good engine to put into it. And my dream cars are along this line are Pacers and anything interesting bodied from the 60s to the 80s, something rear wheel drive that I can relatively easily put a modern engine in. I need disc brakes and a modern engine and a stick shift.
Yeah. That's cool. And I'm bleeding into our guest questions, so maybe we should just go ahead and do those real quick. We always ask our guests three questions that are scripted and one that's completely random. The first question is, Sam, what's your dream car?
I've been such an automotive fan for so long that there isn't one. There's a bunch of them, and I've been fortunate enough because I am treated as a journalist as part of my job, that I've been able to ride in or drive a bunch of cars. And so a number of years ago, I got a ride in one of my dream cars, which is an XJ220 Jaguar.
Oh, nice.
Got a ride in the Nazareth Raceway from a professional driver around the course, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
As part of being a historian, one of my areas of expertise is Vector. So I've always wanted a W8 or an M12 Vector.
Damn.
I wrote the history of the company for Collectible Automobile magazine about 25 years ago.
Wow.
And have since toured the Wilmington plant with the late Jerry Weigert, and the Jacksonville plant with the late Tim Enright, who was the president of that company.
Amazing.
And
so amazing.
I've got a range of cars from I used to own a Suzuki Swift GT, which I would love to have another one. That was a fantastic car.
Yeah, you don't hear that often.
I drove that car for 14 years and 150,000 miles and never had a problem with it. It was spectacular.
Yeah.
40 miles to the gallon, day in, day out, and it was quick. And my first car was a Dodge Aries, and I would buy that car back today if I could.
Oh yeah.
These are things that I'm not used to hearing from people, right? It's just, it's like,
I like weird cars.
Yeah, no, I'm not judging either. I'm kind of in awe of that because, you ask people what their dream cars are and they're like, oh, Porsche, Ferrari,
I gotta have a Cobra. I gotta have a, I've met those people and I'm like, that's fine. But, you have something distinctive, something that nobody has ever seen. When I worked for Chilton, the other editors would make fun of me because I found in a book one time this car that I really, really wanted, and I showed it to them, and it was a Mohs safari car. And in the book that I was reading said that the Mohs safari car was rarely built more than 3 or 4 a year from 1967 to 1976. And I did all the research on it and found they built 3 of them. Period.
Wow.
And I know the owner of one of them, and it pops up for sale every once in a while. And anyone who used to know me were like, "Look, your car's for sale." I'm like, I don't have $200,000 to buy that car.
It's
Very
crazy.
exclusive.
Yeah. No. Okay. So thank you for that. And Sam, where's your next road trip going to be likely?
Oddly enough, I rarely plan out things very far in advance, but next weekend I'm going to a car show in St. Michael's. I'm judging at the St. Michael's Concours next weekend. So that's my next road trip.
That's very cool. Judging a Concours, what's that all about?
It's loads of fun because you meet some fantastic people, either the other judges or the owners of these cars, and you get to see some spectacular places. I have judged at the Greenbrier in West Virginia. There used to be a car show at the Hershey Hotel in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Spectacular show, but it lost its funding a few years ago. But you get to meet owners of some of the most rare, spectacular cars you've ever seen, and a lot of them are really, really nice people.
Sure.
And then the judges are just so knowledgeable. I sit in awe of them as we walk around, and they teach me what this car was supposed to have and what this car wasn't supposed to have, and not to badmouth anyone, but I will. And so I love judging cars, and I will judge any class of car. But I had to judge at a former show called the Burn Prevention Concours of Eastern Pennsylvania, and it was at Lehigh, at the University of Lehigh.
Mm-hmm.
And I consider myself a utility player. If you have a hole to fill, I will judge that class. And so they needed a hole to fill of 63 to 67 Corvettes. Okay, fine. So we go over to them, and we start in the first car, and I see a little bit of overspray on the engine, and I'm like, this is so precise. These cars are so well taken care of that you have to deduct for the littlest thing because that's all that will separate one from another. So I see the overspray, and I get to the second car, and the second car has the same overspray. I go to the third car, it has the same overspray. I'm like, Corvette restorers are the most insane people on the planet because they will restore to the nth degree, even if it has overspray on the engine. So they all had the identical overspray. So I had to go back to the first car and rejudge all the cars because they had done this.
That sounds a lot like the superstitiousness of distillers. How they'll replicate every dent on their still if they have to replace a panel because they don't want to ruin the juju of the product.
Superstition is one thing. These people do this on purpose because that's the way it came from the
factory. Yeah,
right. Down to the overspray. That's just crazy.
No, my favorite was that I heard somewhere that you can buy the actual reproduction crayons that they used along the assembly line to mark things.
Mm-hmm.
But worse than that, I heard you can buy the booties that they use on the assembly line so that you can be wearing the booties while you're doing it.
Nice.
Yeah, that way if any of the fabric comes off the booty, it's factory specific.
Yeah. That came off the booty. That's fine. That's how it came from the factory.
That's fantastic. That's just too funny. I'm reminded of what's his name, Warman, the guy who does all the Mopar restorations out in Oregon. He's very famous. He's got his own little show. Oh God, but he is so exacting, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
he'll make sure that the factory markings are done in the same color paint on the axle, on the differential. He's got OCD about that sort of thing, and I guess that's what separates a good restorer from the rest of us.
Well, that's
Yeah. No, you're protecting the screwdriver blade when you turn a nut is too
that's
Exactly.
that's what I love about being a Lotus enthusiast, and why you'll see so few of them in a concourse type event, because there was so much just use what we've got on hand at the factory, so much doing things on a shoestring, and two cars built the same year aren't put together the same way. So you
Yeah.
can't make a standard for accuracy.
I love those small factories like Lotus, like TVR, like Morgan, like Checker.
Yeah.
When I worked for Chilton, we had a book. My favorite book to work on there was an emissions guide. We had bought it from another company, and we had to revise the whole book. And the book was just an inspection guide. It just told you what it came with from the factory. And so we had to cover everything. And I turned to the editor of the magazine, or the book, and I showed him the table of contents. I said, any of these brands that you don't recognize, I'll take. And so I did Checker. And this was 10 years after they built their last car. And I called Checker because the company still exists. They made body panels for GM.
Mm.
And I talked to the guy and I said, I'm looking for the emissions controls on a propane powered Checker. And he goes, we have one of those around back, and we might have the stickers here. And I could hear him rustling through a drawer of stickers, trying to find me one for that car.
Nice.
It's crazy. All right, Sam, question number 3. What's the most fascinating thing you've seen in either someone's garage or on the road?
I was a board member of the Society of Automotive Historians for years. And every year the board would meet. They would meet in Hershey in the fall and some city around the country in the spring. And we got to see some great collections. One of the collections was in St. Louis, and there was a car called a Maytag. And
Yeah.
it was designed by the Duesenberg brothers before they built the Duesenberg. And the gentlemen who were on the board at the time, I was in my 30s, and they were in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And to see a 70-year-old man watching a 100-year-old Maytag running, and the look on his face like Christmas morning, I wish I could have captured it on a picture, because he was just in awe that this 100-year-old Maytag was operating with his exposed valves and the oil flashing around all over the place. That was one of my favorites. But one that sticks out in my mind was, there's a repair shop outside of Philadelphia. It was just down the street from the Chilton offices. And I got a tour of the place, and it was just packed bumper to bumper with all these British cars and Porsches. And I could see a car in the corner, and it was like a 1920s chassis with a milled block straight 8. And that's all I could see. There was no bodywork on it. What is that over there? He said, it's a Pedroso. I'm pretty well informed on names of brands. I've never heard that one, because they built 2 of these to race at Le Mans. And one of them sank in a ship crossing the Atlantic, and this is the other one.
Wow.
And so a couple years later, at an SAH board meeting, we're in the basement of the Peterson Museum, and we're seeing all the stuff not on display. And the young guy who's giving us the tour, young guy being younger than me at the time, pulls the cover off this car and says, anyone know what kind of car this is? And all these guys who have centuries of knowledge all looked at it and went, I have no idea what that is. And he goes, it's a Pedroso. And he said, there were 2 built, and we don't know where the other one is. I said, where did this one come from? It was Pennsylvania. Okay, that's the one I know of. It now had its bodywork on it. But I thought I had pieced together the mystery of the missing Pedroso, but it
Sadly,
was spectacular to see the one and only.
right.
And
So
what year was that car built in?
20, probably like 28.
Okay.
So the other one's still on the bottom of the Atlantic, huh?
Apparently it's still in the bottom of the ocean.
Let's go get it.
Right.
Go find a snow cruiser while we're at it too.
Yeah, sure. Let's just spend some time out there. Let's do it. All right, Sam, last question of the day is always something silly and stupid and frivolous. If you could make the clouds rain down anything, what would they rain down?
I'm liking that one. Let's see. Italian food would be good.
Yeah.
Can never have enough money. That'd be good too.
Yeah.
How about wishes?
I like it.
Granted wishes, maybe. That's
Oh yes. Yeah. No. I'm taking his answer. That's the answer I have. Yes.
nice.
Granted wishes. That's cool. All
Sam,
right.
I've got a different question for you.
Sure.
With your extensive knowledge of car design through the years, what's the strangest item you've seen on a production car that somebody thought this was a good idea, but you've never seen it replicated on another car.
Well, can I stretch with production?
Yes.
That I had mentioned before, the Safari car.
Yeah.
Bruce Baldwin Mohs owned an seaplane company in Wisconsin. And one day he decided to build a car. And his first car, he was very into safety. So his first car was built on an International Travelall chassis. It looks like a car. It's the most ostentatious car because it's called the Ostentation Opera Sedan. It has no side doors. It has a large hatch that you walk down through the middle and you sit in the 4 seats, but the car is 20 feet long. So it only seats 4. And that car would be bad enough. But the Safari car, which they built 3 of, was a convertible. So they couldn't have the hatch. So it has these giant doors. They're 6 feet long each, and they slide straight out, not along the car like a minivan, but straight out to the side. And they're mounted on 3 rods that hold it out there right in the middle. So there's this giant 6-foot door held on by 3 rods in the center. So if you touch the door, it just rocks back and forth. And you have to enter it either from the back if you're getting to the back seat or from the front to get to the front seat. But that's not the worst part of the car. The worst part of the car are the 3 front seats that you have, which are bucket seats, and they are mounted by a hinge at the headrest. So the bottom of the seat swings if you go around corners.
Okay.
Steering wheel and the pedals do not.
Whoops.
So I asked the owner of the car, I said, what is the fastest you've ever had this car to with the swinging seats? He goes 15 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I can imagine, because you couldn't be able to touch the pedals if you went too far around a corner.
Yeah, I remember seeing one of those in a museum somewhere. It was in the Imperial Palace collection in Las Vegas back in the early 90s.
Yes.
And I remember not only was the exterior covered in leather,
Naugahyde.
yeah, well, yeah, I couldn't tell the difference at that distance, but they had it on display with one of those doors open, and I didn't know anything about it at the time. And I see that horizontal ramming door like that, and I think the word Safari. And I thought, okay, I can imagine this thing riding along in the bush and extending that door to knock a rhino out of the way.
The amazing part about those doors is they glide so softly. That when he was closing the door, I just touched the door and it just slowly closed. Wow. But the latch for the doors are kind of like your window latches. Right. They have a angled ramp that would seal the front and back. And when he closed the door, he sealed, and he could see the front was sealed, but he couldn't see that the back was open. And so I had to literally push the door closed so he could catch both latches at the same time, because the door was so long that it would not line up every time.
Wow.
So here it is.
Yes.
That thing. Yeah.
The gentleman that I know who owns it restored this car. This is his car. And
nice guy, right?
He said that he had almost all of it completed, but he had to replace that hood ornament.
Huh.
And they built 3 of these cars. So he thought about, why would they have a hood ornament crafted for 3 cars, and how would I get a replacement for one? And his story was that he was driving along one day and he saw a flag and realized that the eagle at the top of the flag was the hood ornament.
Nice.
That's hilarious.
Available at any Home Depot.
Exactly.
Right. How do I stop this? Oh, there it is. That's cool. Sam, this is really cool. I'm glad you got to join us today, and thank you for making the time on a Saturday to come to play with the thing about cars. I think I'll speak for all of us when I say I hope we can do this again sometime.
I look forward to it. I enjoy these chats.
Let's answer our trivia question, and then we'll wrap the episode. The trivia question was, what was the last car offered with hidden/flip-up headlights? Was it the Mazda MX-5 Miata? Was it the Lotus Esprit? Was it the Chevy Corvette? Or choice E, was it the Esprit and the MX-5 Miata? Choice D, was it the Corvette and the Esprit? You want to take the first guess, Sam?
Well, the second generation Miata didn't have pop-up headlights. The Corvette ran through the early 90s, early 2000s. The Esprit stopped production before then, I believe. And I'm going to go with the Corvette.
Going to say the Corvette? All right. Tim, what do you think?
Oh, boy. I was thinking now Sam tainted my answer, and I can't remember my logic now that he threw additional logic on top of it.
Well done on my part.
I'll go with the Corvette.
You'll go with the Corvette? Ben, what do you think?
I'm thinking the Esprit is involved in here somewhere.
Fair enough. The answer is both the Corvette and the Esprit. Model year 2004 marks the last stand for hidden headlights. Lotus pulls the plug on its Esprit sports car, and Chevrolet waves off the 5th generation Corvette in order to welcome the 6th generation 2005 model with its fixed headlights. Pop-ups have stayed unpopped since. So, yes, and I was disappointed because I like a good pop-up headlight.
Well, they're also no longer legally permitted in a lot of places. I know in the UK you cannot build a car with them anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Or not sell one there. It's a safety thing. It's it's not so much a ban on the pop-up light as much as a requirement that the light be affixed to a non-moving body part.
Right.
For pedestrian
if you have a failure of the actuation mechanism, then you can no longer get the lights up and running. But as a former owner of a 1983 Mitsubishi Starion, I can tell you if there's a problem with the actuation motors, they would automatically fail in the upright position. That was their last.
Good.
The vacuum operated lights on Lotus and Lawns after a certain year would fail to the raised position as well.
Right.
I think Bricklands did the same thing. That's why they all wink.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And my Esprit had a different setup. It used the same motor as a TR7, and if it failed, it did not fail to up, but you could go in there and turn a little knob to manually raise it.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah,
exactly.
And
it took about a million turns.
Then you had the Opel GT, which was a fully manual throw of a lever inside the driver's seat area.
And the GT rotated sideways.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. I grew up in a small town, and every time when I was a kid, every time new cars came out, I went to the dealerships, and so I had my mom drag me to the Chevy dealer when the '84 Corvette came out, and they would once prominently sitting in the showroom, and I wanted to see those headlights work, so I hit the button, and they flip almost 180 degrees over, and in a showroom they are really loud. And so there was a older woman sitting at a bench right at the nose of the car when I turned them on, and they shocked the crap out of her when they flipped over. Bang! I was startled. I flipped them back and went, oh. And then she brought her friend over and goes, show them. So I did it again.
But being a German car, they made up for the complexity elsewhere. A friend of mine has a GT, and he says that the electrical controls on the headlights are insane, that there's something like 8 relays in the lighting circuit on that car. And if any one relay fails, the whole works doesn't work.
So that's where the engineers for hardtop convertibles went to after they finished the Fords, I guess.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right.
So, Sam, again, thanks again for being our guest. I'm going to plug your museum here, the Boyertown Museum of Historic Vehicles. The website is boyertownmuseum.org. That's Boyer, Boyer, boyertownmuseum.org. It's a very cool website, lots of cool pictures on it. And I can't wait to visit, and I will look forward to you being a guest on the show again.
If anyone goes there, just tell them Sam sent you, and they'll take care of you.
Very cool. Thanks, Sam. Hope everybody listening has a good week or a good weekend in front of them, whatever the case may be. In the meantime, stay safe out there. We'll see you with another episode in about a week. Take care, everybody.
See ya.
Bye now.
Thank you for listening. This has been The Thing About Cars. We'll see you on the road.